Yes. I think you need to make the announcement first.
I know, it's not,
You have 110%
Yeah.
quorum.
and it's like on Mumbai, isn't it?
Yes,
That's where.
I'm here.
Oh, yeah, when was the last time I saw you?
Well, last month I was not here, but other than that, I saw you every other time.
Yeah, I want to see you live.
Yes. I actually have the unusual situation where my mother is with me this week, so I
know.
will leave her
Yeah.
unattended. But you'll see me soon.
Good.
And congratulations on the award you received last year.
Thank you. Thank you.
Everything is ready to go.
Okay. All right, so good evening, everyone. Welcome to the February 13, 2025 meeting of the Health and Environmental Committee. My name is Elvie Barroso, and I'm the chair of the committee. Tonight, we are joined by Assistant District Manager Brendan Burke. This meeting is called to order at 6:32 p.m. As a reminder, New York State law requires all committee members who are not able to attend the meeting in person to have their cameras on and their first and last names displayed from the time the meeting is called to order until the time the meeting is adjourned. Members of the public who are attending virtually, you can raise any questions or comments that you have through the Q&A feature of Zoom. Members of the public who are here in person, you can raise any questions that you have by raising your hand. If there is time following the committee's discussion, we will field questions from the public. We need a volunteer to take minutes tonight. If you are able to take minutes, please let us know.
For the record, Marty volunteered last month, so
Yeah.
Marty should be off the hook.
Yes.
Can I be off the hook if I volunteer to do it for another committee?
Yeah.
I'm gonna take that as a yes. Is there anyone who hasn't done it?
Well, we are starting for this year, so we started with Marty doing it in January.
I'm happy to do the minutes.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Mubin.
and we'll make sure to send what you need for the minutes, Mubin.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you so much, Mubin.
You're very welcome.
So we will now take attendance by roll call. Brendan will conduct the roll call.
If any members, I will call your name. Your name is called, please say present. I will announce if there is quorum. Marty Barrett,
Present.
Elvie Barroso,
Present.
Barack Friedman,
Present.
Rupal Kakad,
Present.
Kevin O'Keefe,
I'm present. I apologize. I can't be on camera at this time.
noted. Miriam Rowe,
Present.
and Mubin Siddiqui. I do see Mubin, so she is present. And
Present, present, sorry.
Okay. And we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Brendan. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and is reflected on the screen before you. If there is no objection, we will adopt the agenda. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the agenda, please raise your hand. Seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. The minutes from the January 9th meeting were distributed ahead of time by the board office. If there is no objection, we will adopt the minutes as drafted. Members of the committee, if you object to adopting the minutes, please raise your hand. Seeing no objections, the minutes from the January 9th meeting are adopted. They will soon be available on the CB6 website. So in order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's observe for a few ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. Committee members who are here in person, if you have a question about committee business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand and I will identify you so you can speak. Committee members unable to attend in person, if you have a question about committee business, you may raise your hand through Zoom and I will identify you so you can speak. All committee members, it is extremely important that only one person speak at a time so that members of the public watching at home can understand what is being said by each committee member. The chat function for committee members present via Zoom should not be used for committee business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record by raising your hand through Zoom. Chat should only be used to alert us to any technical difficulties you are having or to state in writing information that was already stated aloud on the record during the meeting. Our first agenda is a presentation by NYU Langone Health on newer methods for administering CPR and defibrillation. Our speaker tonight is Dr. Joseph Offenbacher, who is an emergency medicine physician at NYU Langone Health. He is a clinical assistant professor at the Ronald O. Perelman Department of Emergency Medicine at NYU Grossman School of Medicine and Associate Director of the Emergency Medicine Residency Program. Please welcome Dr. Joseph Offenbacher.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. Thank you so much for the introduction. It's great to be here with all of you. As kind of you mentioned, so my roles in the department are both that I work clinically. I'm a clinician in the emergency department as an attending, and also a large chunk of my time is spent teaching the residents on how to do lots of important things in medicine, including the management of resuscitations and cardiac arrest. Over my years doing this, I've learned that particularly for the trainees, but I think for everybody in general, I think that the most important part of these, high intensity, high complexity kind of activities is really good comprehension. And, I'm also a trauma instructor, and over the years, I've learned that sometimes that these kind of courses, BLS courses, ACLS courses, which are basic life support and advanced life support, training processes don't always really kind of give that kind of context and comprehension. So my kind of overarching goal tonight is to kind of go through some of the updates in cardiac arrest management, since they are so important for bystander participation, for just people out in the community to do the right thing at the right time, and hopefully try and grounded in some kind of context or at least underlying comprehension, because I think that will make it easier to perform these activities when under the times that they're needed. So please, if you have any questions at any time, please stop me. Any thoughts or comments as well. It seems like a group that's good for discussion, so that format certainly works for me as well. See if we can slide. Okay, so the objectives, I have 4 objectives for tonight. The first is to kind of understand the history of cardiac arrest management, to kind of try and understand kind of a little bit of that longitudinal perspective of where we kind of grew up with cardiac arrest, maybe over the last 15, 20 years, and where we are now, and hopefully kind of into the future, and what your role out in the community might be to participate in that. The other is to describe a little bit of the scientific basis for these updated guidelines. I promise this is not a college science class or a physiology lecture, but I think some of these very basic concepts will make it very understandable to why you're doing the things you're doing. And I think that will make it much more easy to do these things. I think another important goal is to kind of recognize your role out in the community in the management of cardiac arrest patients. These things happen unexpectedly, and it's just people that are walking by that often make the biggest difference in whether or not these people actually live or die. And then the last is to consider the impact of broader public health. So how policies, how things you can enact can really make a difference moving forward. So the 2 things that I want you to remember, and there's a reason for this time warp. For those of you that are not familiar, the image on the left was kind of this show that was popular, I guess, in the late 80s, early 90s, before I was born and a little kid. And then there was the reboot of it a little bit later. And the lifeguard theme is going to become important in a second. But I want you to remember two things, which is that I think the biggest and most important part of understanding where we are with cardiac arrest is to think of how we have actually evolved, how over time things have changed and how we've learned more, but also how context is also very important too. So some of the context, including Baywatch, where we might have first encountered things like cardiac arrest or CPR, might have given us some ideas or some themes that are very relevant in maybe that context, but really aren't relevant for the context that most of us will appreciate or experience cardiac arrest, hopefully not for ourselves, but in life. So we're going to talk a little bit about time and how things have changed, and the other is context. So I want you to keep that in mind. So starting with time and context. So the most of us, if we've ever encountered, cardiac arrest care, are usually kind of in this context, especially out in the community, maybe the pool space. There's a lot of, the oceans are right here, the beaches are right here. Many of us kind of grew up with this, algorithm in our mind of, CPR, a few compressions on the chest, and then breaths, right? Chest compression, maybe it was 15 you were taught, maybe it was 30 you were taught, maybe it was one breath you were taught, maybe it was two. But it was this idea of that these people aren't breathing, they may have drowned, something may have happened at the pool. So you need to keep pumping on their chest so they keep blood going to their body. And also you need to give them oxygen, because if they're not having oxygen, they're not breathing by themselves. There were two problems with this theme that we may have all grown up with. The first one is that the context of cardiac arrest for most people that you will encounter out on the street or out in the community are not primarily respiratory. So the idea that we need to breathe for patients, that's changed a little bit in the recent past with the opiate epidemic and with Narcan. But for most people that you will encounter with cardiac arrest, they didn't go into cardiac arrest because they drowned. They went into a cardiac arrest for other reasons that we'll talk about in a minute. The other is we also recognize is that the biggest problem people have with cardiac arrest is not that their oxygen is low, it's that they're not perfusing. They're not getting enough blood from their heart to the rest of their organs. So even if there is oxygen left in the blood, which could be used by these organs to function, the problem is we can't get it there, which is why we do things. And if you remember, these things actually became very complex, right? There used to be these algorithms where one person by themselves would do these whole series of compressions, and then they would try and breathe for the patients, and they would do it twice, and then they would try again. And we know this doesn't work, right? People can't give effective compressions for that long. Most of us are not in good enough shape to do that for more than 1 or 2 minutes. And certainly when you're trying to do multiple tasks, get effective breaths, use CPR at the same time, it just doesn't work. And by the way, in case you were thinking, well, this is all, some doctor in a hospital telling you that, they got it wrong somewhere else, and in the hospital, they do it better. The reality is, if you were to take any one of my residents, any emergency medicine residents, certainly going back over the last 5 years, or any surgical resident, and you were to wake them up in the middle of the night and say, what is your algorithm for somebody that goes into cardiac arrest? They actually have the same wrong algorithm for which most of these old CPR algorithms existed, and it was ABC: airway, breathing, and circulation. So the first thing you would do if you found somebody is you would check their airway. That's usually their mouth and their upper ability to breathe. If they weren't able to breathe effectively, you would find some way, either with a mask or in a bag, or in the olden days, which we certainly don't recommend anymore, people gave direct breathing. Going back to that first Baywatch poster, that was kind of what people used to do all the time, which is certainly not safe and certainly not recommended. And only then do you get to the bottom of the algorithm where people start actually doing CPR. We know that that is not the right way to do things. And we know that for most patients, the key and most important thing to do is to start with CPR. So in the hospitals, we've actually upgraded this algorithm. This is the American Heart Association, which we will reference throughout most of the rest of this talk. And this is their CPR algorithm. And they have now placed compressions foremost on your list of activities to do. So if you are out in the street and you see somebody that collapses in front of you, your first thought, we'll talk about a few other operational steps, but your first medical thought is, I need to start giving this person blood to the rest of their body. So I need to start doing compressions on their chest. Okay. This is not a BLS course. Those can be taught, and you can talk more about how many compressions, how deep to do them, how many in a certain amount of time. That's not my goal for tonight, but my goal is for you to remember that the first and most important thing you could do for these patients medically, we'll talk about the other important steps in a minute, is to start doing compressions. And I think now that we understand how we've evolved from this ABC to this CAB, I think the way to reinforce that is to really understand the underlying science behind it. So this is also from the American Heart Association. And the American Heart Association defines cardiac arrest as when the heart stops beating, for lots of different reasons, often it's electrical. For most of our patients, we'll talk about that later. There is not an ability to circulate blood to the organs that need oxygen. So your blood may very well still have oxygen still within it, but it is unable to get that oxygen that's so desperately needed to keep you alive to the rest of the organs. So the goal is not to give the blood more oxygen by giving breaths or by giving, other oxygen supply. The first goal is to make sure we're getting the heart to push blood to the rest of your body so whatever oxygen there is to work. Okay, so those are the two things to remember, right? There's not enough blood getting to your vital organs, therefore not enough oxygen getting to your vital organs, which means the patient is not alive. And the primary cause of this, we now know, for most people is cardiac, is the heart itself. So whereas maybe when teenagers are at a beach and somebody drowns, the issue is that they became hypoxic. They didn't have enough oxygen because they drowned. That is really the vast minority of people that you will see and be able to intervene on. The vast majority of those people will have got into cardiac arrest because for whatever reason, their heart stopped working the way it's supposed to. To understand why the heart stops working the way it's supposed to, we're going to do a little bit more science, and I promise there's a reason behind doing the science, very practical to what you'll do in the community. The way I describe it to even my residents, people that have gone through medical school and who know science theoretically very well, is to just keep a very simple model in your head. And this model I like to have in my head, and I keep this all the time, I say this to my patients and to the residents, is think of the little mechanical car you got when you were a kid, or you gave to your kid or to your friend's kid. You push on an electrical apparatus, it gives you electricity, and then the electricity drives a mechanical motor, okay? What happens is the heart operates almost in an identical fashion. The heart has a very interesting and complex way that it circulates electricity through the muscle. And when that electricity is circulated through a very specific pattern through the heart muscle, the muscle itself then contracts in a certain way that allows, again, remember the initial principle, blood to get out of the heart to the organs that need to get there. The problem with the heart is that if it doesn't have electricity in a very specific pattern, I'm sure you've seen an EKG before, this is a normal EKG. If that does not exist, then the heart will not mechanically beat properly. And if the heart does not mechanically beat properly, then you will not get blood to the places you need to. What we now know, the science has taught us, is that the vast majority of the cardiac arrest patients you will see will have developed an abnormal electrical rhythm for some reason. It could be a heart attack. Remember, the problem with a heart attack in the immediate sense is that it disrupts the electrical activity of the heart, such that your heart does not beat appropriately to get blood to where it needs to go. If it's a younger person, there are all kinds of reasons why the electrical activity of the heart might not be working appropriately, and therefore the heart does not beat appropriately. Is everybody with me there? Does this make sense to everybody? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. The reason that this is important, so we've now gone away from the idea that there's not enough oxygen in the blood. We don't need to give patients oxygen. We need to give them good compressions on their chest. And therefore, most of the updated algorithms, and this is one example of one from Seattle that has an excellent EMS service, is something called hands-only CPR. For these patients, the only thing they want you to focus on, circling back to what we talked about before, was that big C, the C that we talked about in the beginning, which was cardiac. You see a patient that is in cardiac arrest, your first and most important task is to make sure blood from the body, or the heart in this case, is circulating through the body, and you do that through artificially compressing on somebody's chest, okay? But we added another point with all the science that we talked about before, which is that for most people, the underlying reason that the heart itself is not beating is because of an abnormal electrical activity. Our goal is to fix that, and is to restore proper electrical activity. And what we know is that there are certain rhythms. These are two examples of abnormal rhythms. Do not worry. Any standard defibrillator that you find out on the street will be able to analyze and do this for you. All you have to do is to be able to put the pads on the chest, which in every defibrillator you'll see in the street has very clear instructions of how to do that. It will decide whether or not it has this abnormal rhythm, and it will then decide whether or not defibrillation needs to happen. Does that make sense? So you're fixing two problems. You encounter a patient that's in cardiac arrest. Medically, we're going to take a step backwards in a minute, but purely from the clinical perspective, your goals are two. Very simple, but now you can understand them because we've gone through some of the science, which is goal number one is while you're waiting to get the machine, you are actively trying to get blood to the rest of their body. And once somebody can give you a machine to fix the underlying problem, which is the electrical rhythm, you put the pads on and you put them back in a normal electrical rhythm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So those are your big goals, right? And those are the goals that that I want you to remember why you're doing those things. This is from pediatrics. You'll see that there's still breaths in the pediatric literature. The reason for this is because children are the only class of patients that on regular do go into cardiac arrest because of breathing reasons. Adults don't, but children do. The reason I bring this up to you, though, is because I want you, in addition to the medical steps that I wanted you to take, I want to give in some very important operational steps to build those things together. So what happens when you are walking down the street and you see somebody going into cardiac arrest? Okay, the first thing you always do when taking care of anybody else, and it's the rule from when you ever get on a plane, right? What do they say when you get on a plane and the oxygen masks drop? What do you do first?
To yourself.
You put your own mask on first, 100%, right? Before you help somebody else. Sorry? Right? You put your own mask on first. This is equally, if not more important than in cardiac arrest care. When you approach a patient that is in cardiac arrest, your first thing to do is make sure that the scene is safe for you or anybody else that is going to participate. Okay? So that is number one. If something happens to you, you can't help anybody else. So operational step one is to make sure it's safe for you to go. Operational step two is because you can only do those medical steps for so long. Trust me, I've done CPR many, many times. I'm not in the best shape of anybody, but I'm certainly not in the worst. And after 60 seconds, 65 seconds, I'm done, right? I'm not good that long, right? So the next step is call for help, right? You need help. And that's either telling somebody else that's there, call 911, go look for a defibrillator, or calling 911 yourself, and they trying to help get you a unit that should have a defibrillator, okay? And then once you've gotten to that point, you can then go into your medicine mode of I'm doing CPR. Does that make sense? I'm doing compressions on the patient's chest, and then hopefully a defibrillator can come. I can hopefully fix the underlying problem. This is also from the American Heart Association. This is what we call the out-of-hospital cardiac arrest chain of survival, of which, to give context, almost all of these first three steps, almost half the algorithm is done by non-medical professionals, done by lay people out in the street, which is an incredibly wonderful thing. So you go, and it's all the steps we talked about, right? Operationally, you see a patient in cardiac arrest. You first make sure the scene is safe. They should have included that. They didn't, but you always keep in your mind, make sure it's safe for you and whoever participates. Call for help is number one. You're not going to fix the problem by yourself. You're going to need somebody to get you the resources you need. And then high quality CPR, right? Scientifically, remember, we now know that patients go into cardiac arrest and die not because there's not enough oxygen in their blood. For most patients, the vast majority is because their heart is not working the way it's supposed to, and they're not getting the blood to where it needs to go. So you need to get the blood to where it needs to go mechanically. So you do it mechanically with good compressions. And then you know that for, again, most of these patients, the underlying problem is going to be an abnormal rhythm. So somebody brings a defibrillator, and you use the defibrillator according to the instructions on whatever defibrillator kit you get. And they're usually very simple. It's take off the pads, put them where they tell you to. Different defibrillators ask you to put it on different places on the chest. It does all of the rest of the work and just tells you when to hit shock. Okay. And then The rest of that, the second half of that chain is then done by, theoretically medical professionals. So the advanced resuscitation by the EMTs or the paramedics, and then to the hospital and then forward. Okay. So again, that kind of is the mechanical steps that we in the street can do to help patients that we see in cardiac arrest. Of course, another huge part that I want us to talk about tonight for a few minutes is the public health component to this. So one of the things that we have seen that has made the biggest difference in out-of-hospital cardiac arrest care management is the placement of automatic defibrillators or AEDs throughout logistically important places throughout the city, throughout different areas outside in parks where children play, sports areas, in office buildings. Having these readily available is critical because we know that the underlying problem for the vast majority of out-of-hospital cardiac arrests you see are abnormal rhythms leading to abnormal heartbeats, leading to not getting blood to where it needs to go. So the public health initiatives that we can take to make sure that we have AEDs in the places they need to be are tremendously important and life-saving. I just got back from Israel actually 2 nights ago. This was just an interesting, I was preparing this talk and I saw this. It's such an important public health issue that this is the main national EMS service. They actually partnered with the lottery group, because they set up lottery stations everywhere all over the city for people to buy lottery tickets. It's good business. So they insisted on putting defibrillators, this is their defibrillator boxes, partnering with the lottery team wherever lottery stations are set up to put the defibrillators. And now these are strategically placed all over the place so that people can easily go grab them and use them. I know that in the city at some point, I think they were putting them in phone booths. Before, back when phone booths were a thing. So this is a tremendously important public health initiative and certainly something that I think we've done a lot of. I think on the east side, there's quite a few of these locations, but certainly to maximize these is certainly a life-saving thing. I didn't want this to just be a talk on, CPR that you probably can get for anybody. I did want to add kind of an interesting next level component to this, because it's also something that people that are just participating in the care of cardiac arrest patients can do, and it's actually really the next level. So what I'm about to share with you is really cutting edge stuff. We're actually starting to do this at NYU for lots of reasons. This is called eCPR. Or ECMO, extracorporeal membrane oxygenation, CPR. This is basically putting patients on cardiopulmonary bypass, bypassing their heart and lungs to be able to give oxygen to the organs through blood that they need. One of the interesting things that's happened over the years, and this has become very popular in Europe, if you guys Google later, I think it's the Paris train station, ECMO CPR, there are now teams that can go out into the community with these bypass machines. And there's a patient that you see in cardiac arrest out on the street, and they can actually hook patients up in the street to basically a bypass machine and bring them to the hospital on this bypass machine until their heart or their lungs recovered. It's tremendously fascinating technology. I'll skip ahead for a minute. This is actually what it looks like. It's a small machine. And even in the street, they can put, these are obviously can't be done by just regular people in the street. This has to be done by medical professionals. But they hook the patient up to bypass. There's that famous picture in the Paris train station, but it happens all over, where these patients right in the field are hooked up to this bypass machine, which is a tremendously wonderful thing. It's both life-saving. There are many wonderful studies that show how it has the potential to be tremendously life-saving. It also has the tremendous potential to reimagine how we think about organ donation, because patients that otherwise would have died before ever getting to the hospital and would have never been able to salvage organs for people that are desperately in need of transplantation, even if at the end of the day we're not able to save these patients, there have been tremendous progress in being able to make some good out of all a horrible situation by organ donation. The reason I bring this up, so you might say to me, Joe, why is this relevant for a talk not in the medical context? Because remember, any intervention that we do, from defibrillation to putting patients on eCPR, all starts with good compressions at the beginning by whoever finds the patient in cardiac arrest. So theoretically, this whole highly advanced, cutting edge scientific clinical practice really still starts with Joe Schmo, in this case, me, Joe Schmo, walking down the street, seeing somebody in cardiac arrest and knowing to call for help and immediately initiate CPR. And that is the first step. All of this advanced technology isn't worth anything if that person doesn't make those initial, very straightforward steps in the very beginning. And that's something that all of us can contribute to. This is the BLS algorithm. I'm sorry, it's a little bit small. It basically highlights the steps we talked about, which is, again, you identify the scene, you see somebody that is collapsed or in cardiac arrest. You identify that the scene is safe for you. You start hands-on CPR, good compressions. You hopefully will get access to a defibrillator, either because somebody brings it to you or because you've called for help. EMS has already arrived. Initial attempts at resuscitating the patient's heart electronically or electrophysiologically with a defibrillator are attempted. If that helps, that's great, and that has the best prognosis. That doesn't help, that also tells us something important about whether or not this patient is likely to survive the event. But again, it all starts with anybody identifying somebody in cardiac arrest and immediately starting compressions. So in summary, okay, cardiac arrest care has changed over the years. It's changed in both in our understanding of the science and the physiology, but also in the context and how we now understand how most people go into cardiac arrest. Why do most people go into cardiac arrest? It's not usually the drowning victim at the pool. It's usually somebody either because they've had a heart attack or because they're young and have an underlying arrhythmia, or they're a young athlete and they get hit in the chest and the electrical activity doesn't do what it's supposed to do. So then the heart doesn't beat appropriately and they can't get blood to their organs, right? So now we understand the disease process and we understand how it's evolved. We understand that cardiac arrest means that there's not enough blood getting to your organs, secondary to some kind of electrical malfunction of the heart. Again, this is the vast majority of cases, right? Which is what we're trying to correct. We can't fix all the problems. We fix the ones that we think are most amenable to us fixing and that come up the most often in this context. You can really impact patients' lives by following these algorithms. And again, it's not only you get a defibrillator, maybe the defibrillator works and they get them to the hospital. We've even showed how you become the bridge to the most advanced scientific technologies that exist, including people being put on bypass in train stations or in the street. But it still starts with the same early identification and early CPR. And again, the broader public health policies, right? So, the making sure that we as a community have available defibrillators, obviously teaching as many basic life support courses as possible, offering those courses so that people can effectively take them and learn how to do these techniques. And I think altogether that means that we really can make a difference and change people's lives in the long run. So I ran over by a little bit. I apologize. But that's all I have for you today. I hope this was helpful. And if you have any questions, yeah.
All right, Dr. Joseph, thank you so much for a very comprehensive presentation on CPR. And so we hope that we can use the new updates using the CAB. So we have a question from our members. I can see Kevin.
Thanks, LV. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Dr. Joe, thank you so much for that presentation and really for mentioning public outdoor AEDs. As Marty Barrett knows, since he did some in-person overseas research on this that brought it to CB6's attention, CB6 has actually passed a resolution for the addition of AED boxes for 24/7 access for public outdoor spaces. I'm part of an effort right now. A nonprofit in our community has started raising funds for this pilot AED station in the district. We're interested in knowing any insights you can share. We understand that maintenance and protection from weather conditions is really key here for outdoor public boxes. But what other insight do you have on any other challenges we should keep in mind as we come closer to this AED station becoming reality? And again, this is a pilot station that we hope to then roll out to bus stops and other places.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a great question. That's an amazing initiative. I mean, I think overall of, if first of all, my email is just my first dot last name at nyulangone.org. Please, if I could ever be helpful in any of these initiatives or anything that you guys are working on, please feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'm sure plenty of people have my contact from the group. I was emailing a bunch of people, so please let me know. I think it's a tremendously valuable initiative. We do know that overall, the most lives are changed because of these, having these publicly available defibrillators. It's a good question on the weather. I don't know very much about it. I do know that at the end of the day, one of the most important things is then education around these. So people knowing that they exist. So good campaigns to make sure that the community is well aware that these things are available to them, that they are there. And then also the training of their use, which is a little bit harder, but those things kind of all go together. Because these things need to be identifiable. People really need to know that they're there. That's the first step. We call them in the ED like super users of like the computer, like people that have advanced knowledge of the EMR and stuff like that. So maybe getting together teams of people that that would know, where that then they can communicate that out to the rest of the community that they see. I think is a tremendously important thing. And at the end of the day, always the more people that are trained, I mentioned my experience overseas in Israel. One of the initiatives they had back when I was a high school student was they really, like some kids joined the basketball team or the football team. They actually trained all of us to be EMTs in addition to playing basketball and all those other sports. So the more that we can go out into the schools and into the community to be able to say, listen, these AEDs are here. This is how you would use them. Might be a tremendously wonderful complement to materially putting these things out there. And I think those are very valuable. And if you do that kind of in the school system, you actually train people in a way that they become enthusiastic about it and they're in a learning context. So they are always learning and teaching from other people. And that kind of self-propels itself moving forward.
So don't become reliant, because I know some of the boxes we're looking at, you could actually speak live to a professional through, obviously a screen. So
Yeah.
you're saying, try to lean more towards educating walk-up use as opposed to finding that live 24/7 professional?
You certainly could do both. I mean, I certainly getting the best equipment that can talk people through it is often ideal. But one of these actually, it's ironic that I do a lot of research on how and why people make clinical decisions, which this now becomes. One of the things we know is that people will very often not use tools available to them for all kinds of choice architecture reasons. So for those of you that are familiar with economics, choice architecture was a theme that won the Nobel Prize with Richard Thaler in the mid-2000s. The simple theory behind it is if you put fruits at eye level in the store and chips at the bottom, people are more likely to eat fruits and vegetables rather than chips. Or if you opt people in for insurance rather than opt them out, opting out means that more people will yield to getting insurance because they don't feel like they have to do anything extra. I think your most common challenge with something like this is how do you architect it in a way that people are readily knowing it's there and using it. Certainly getting defibrillators that people can speak to is a tremendously valuable thing. That's a wonderful part of choice architecture, but people still need to know that they're there and to grab them. So that is certainly an education campaign that probably needs to start too, because people might not know to look for it. People might not know to grab it. So even if you don't show them how to use it, just to know this is where AEDs are around your community. This is where AEDs are around in your school. I think that's a tremendously valuable thing. To give you an example, I was actually once taking care of a patient in NYU. This person was in business and was a significant person. This guy was about to go for business trips all over the place. I recommended that they actually stay in the emergency department, but they left against my advice, which is totally okay. Patients can do that. But I knew their underlying disease process might actually lead them to exactly this case where they might go into cardiac arrest. So I said to the person they were with, they had one of their staff members with them. I said, listen, wherever you go with this person, make sure you know where there's a defibrillator. You're walking into a plane, you're walking into an office building, you're walking into somewhere else. Know that this is going to be the therapy for this person if they collapse, and prime your mind ahead of time to look for it. So it's wonderful to put these out. And then the next step is to say, how do people just know to look for it? So whether or not it's pamphlets, whether it's not going out into the school or into the offices saying, we have these machines here for you. If somebody goes into cardiac arrest, it will even talk to you, but just know to grab it, will increase your yield on that tremendously, I think. So that would be my advice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think, Marty, you still have a question? No more? Okay, so Mubin?
Hi, Dr. Joe. First of all, again, thank you for that very, very informative presentation. It definitely demystified many myths I had myself in my mind about CPR. I was still relying on the old model. I have a quick question, and you did allude to teaching sessions and more availability of information, but what specifically is NYU doing in terms of engaging with the community on a systematic basis about it? Because it seems like this is such a basic and integral tool that everybody should have. And the more people know in the community, the more they can engage with making a difference.
That's a great question. I do know that we have many, many wonderful public health initiatives that are currently going on at NYU. I don't know that this is one of them, although it certainly could be. So let me go back and try and find some more information on that. And certainly if this is not one of the initiatives that's currently undergoing, it's certainly one that I think should and can be started, especially if you guys in the community feel that it would be valuable. I'm certainly very happy to go back and to see what initiatives already exist. And it's certainly possible that this is just not, there's many, many initiatives, if this is not one of them, to help the team try and organize something like this moving forward and to partner with the community in this. I certainly think that would be a wonderful use of everybody's participation. So.
Yes, I would highly encourage you, because I took CPR when I first became a mother, and there's a lot of young mothers in the neighborhood and in the district. And I'm sure many of them still think that in addition to the compressions, mouth resuscitation is the first thing we think of.
Sure.
When somebody goes down. So I think it'll be very invaluable.
Yeah, 100%. Let me do that. Is there somebody I can reach out to? Ideally, I know there's Rebecca who set this all up, but is that a good point person who she'll be able to reach out to you? Okay. Yes. So I will send an email on my end to Rebecca, and if somebody could just send an email to Rebecca as well, asking for this, and we'll just make sure that we meet there in the middle. I think certainly happy to. Oh, I think I see Rebecca on here. I didn't even see her before. Sorry. Hi, Rebecca. Certainly happy to do that and be involved with that. I think it would be very helpful. So, yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other question from the committee member?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much.
Nice meeting everybody. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Good night.
Night.
I think there's a Q&A in public. Sorry.
Oh, do you want me to stay on or?
There's another question from the public.
Oh, from the public. Okay.
Yeah, it says, could FDNY be a partner in this too? Placement of defibrillators and other ways.
That's a good question. I do know where to get the answer to that question too. We actually do have a very robust FDNY affiliated EMS service at NYU. The leadership is a wonderful leadership as part of the ED leadership too. So I can ask if through the FDNY or through the EMS service itself, that can help be set up. So I will definitely go back on those two questions and find out.
I'm also a CPR instructor, so I can also
Great.
get involved.
Just
another question.
one quick question. Some of the events that you're having, most of them, or at least none of them that I saw on the last list, were in actually CB6. They were all kind of outside of this community. Do you have any planned within the CB6 coming up?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I will ask Rebecca all of those things. That's a good question. I'll make a list and try and get back to you guys. I only know the topic itself. I'm not, and I know broadly what goes on with the department. I don't know what other departments are doing currently, but I certainly could look into that. And certainly, if this is an area and a topic, I think it's an important one, which is why I asked to speak about it. Then I certainly think that whatever doesn't exist yet certainly is something that there would be more than enough support in NYU and certainly in the emergency department at NYU to help get those initiatives off the ground in collaboration with the group. I think that would, be great. So, and I will certainly
Yes.
do my best to do my part to help that along.
All right, so thank you again.
Nice to meet you all. You all.
Yes, thank you. And we're going to move on to the second agenda, which is the continued discussion on the lead pipes in New York City, water service lines. So what is our,
So I know the last time we had a presentation, they said they had made a couple of suggestions for us as a community to try and help. One of them was just promoting it more so people are aware that there are quite a few buildings in our district that do still have lead pipes. But the other one was, suggestion was like maybe writing some sort of a resolution, because one other thing was about funding, like replacing these lead pipes is very, very expensive. So one of the suggestions made by the person who presented, anybody has any ideas of how do we let people know, how do we make sure the word gets out that, hey, maybe you should check, because the way it was presented was, let's say you're renting a place, there's no way for you to, the city wouldn't reach out to you, the city would reach out to the landlord, the landlord could just ignore it or not do anything. So the person living there needs to then look up if their building has it or not, and then kind of take it from there. So we just need to let people know that, hey, by the way, maybe you should consider looking into this. If you're living here, if you're renting this place, is your building have a lead pipe?
I think I saw it in the newsletter.
Yeah, it was in the newsletter, but I was wondering if there's anything else that we could maybe do to promote it more.
How about links this?
Yeah, that's such a good idea. So I was thinking about that, or maybe, those bus stops, they have those ads going up. Is there a way we can, do we have to pay for it? How does that work?
That I'm not sure of. I would need to check.
Okay, but yeah, links is a good idea, having that pop up so people just letting it out there, getting the word out there.
Yeah, I used the map and found out my building has lead pipes.
Okay,
Yeah,
so,
and I requested a test this morning. So because I was looking at the agenda and I was like, okay, you're in front of the laptop, so you should request a test. So
yeah,
we'll see how it goes.
it'll take a
Yeah.
couple of weeks for you to get it, just
Okay.
FYI, because it took me a
Yeah.
couple of weeks to get it.
We're in a bigger building.
Yeah, no, I mean, according to the maps, our building doesn't have it,
We don't
Stuytown
have-
doesn't have lead
Stuytown does not
pipes,
have
Yeah, because
lead
it's so
pipes.
big. That's
Yeah,
why. He said it was the smaller buildings. and
Yeah.
that's me.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
small.
My building was super red on the map when he presented.
And you know.
Was the last, and I was like, oh my God, and it was the only one that was red on our block, and it's like, of course, it's us. Yeah, so we'll see.
Yeah, all right. I see the hand of Anne. Anne?
Let me. And you should be able to speak now.
Yep, I'm unmuted. So I had, now we'll have heard all ends of it, because when I first heard about this, which was before it was in the board, in the board newsletter, I was in a possible lead service line building. So I of course immediately sent away for the test kit, and I gotta tell you, I'm really impressed. I haven't gotten my results yet, partly because I sat on it for a while because I kept getting up in the morning and turning water on, but they really do a good job in packaging it, and they say, they sort of acknowledge that they're really upfront. They also did talk about some things, like if you discover that you have lead pipes, things that you can do about it. And so I'm wondering if we shouldn't also, kind of highlight that information as well. But I feel like we send an excellent, very comprehensive newsletter, but not everybody reads it all the time. So it can't hurt to put it out there again, because it really is I'm looking up everybody I know, you know what I mean? So, and I was the only one that wasn't green.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I would say it wouldn't hurt to add it again in another newsletter, but again, like, I feel like not everybody signs up for the newsletter, right? We have so many people in our district, not everyone signed up for a newsletter. And number two, like Ann said, not everybody's gonna read everything that's on there.
So
I
what
think
about,
we need different
what about
modes.
writing a reso?
Yeah, so, I mean, we could write a reso about getting them to do, like, help finance some way to replace the lead pipes, but just to get the word out that at least, hey, check to see if you have lead pipes in your building.
Any other thoughts?
Who's going to write the reso? I can give it a shot. This is my idea, so.
That's, I was waiting for you to volunteer.
It was my idea, so I can do it.
Yeah, you can start and we can discuss in the next, yeah. So thank you. So, any other question? We can proceed to the next agenda, which is a discussion on the health impacts from noise in the city. So you
Specifically
wanna,
from sirens.
yes, wanna say something, Mariam?
Yes, I have a bunch of notes and I'm gonna try not to be too boring about it. But, Gail Boer, a couple years ago wrote an op-ed on it and she used to be Manhattan Borough President and now a council member. And before that, before MVP, she was council member. And she has proposed at least 2 or 3 bills in the past few years on how loud siren noise are. And in her op-ed, and I can share articles, including the link to her op-ed later. She writes, sirens perform a critical function, but they do not need to be so disruptive. And the disruptive part is what's been getting to me the past few years. I've been in the same unit for over 8 years now. And the noise did not bother me until 2-3 years ago. And I've spoken to a few other community board members who've also noticed that the volume seems, this is anecdotal, louder to them, and the frequency also seems, they're just way more sirens and more emergency vehicles, or at least maybe like the number of times we hear sirens has increased, so not just the volume, but like how much we hear them throughout the day. And I started looking into it, and the noise pollution is actually why I applied to join the community board. Fortunately, since congestion pricing came into effect, the congestion part, like the honking, has actually almost completely stopped, which has been wild. We've talked about that because I'm so close to the Midtown Tunnel. So you don't have as many cars coming in, so you don't have as many cars blocking the intersections and honking at like all hours, sometimes very random hours at night too. So, but the sirens have not stopped. And that's why I brought it up again recently and I'll share something here, but I wanted to also just get everyone's thoughts and maybe work on a resolution once I've gotten feedback from other people. So some information on sirens and also loud noises. The frequency and volume of emergency vehicle sirens seems to have increased in the past few years, and I'm not the only one on the board who has noticed this. The city's noise code states that the maximum volume of a siren can be no louder than 90 decibels to someone 50 feet away. But DEP has stated that the code does not apply to emergency vehicles. So I don't really know what kind of sirens they're really talking about. Routine exposure to anything above 80 decibels can cause hearing damage. Sirens on NYC emergency vehicles are around 120 decibels. And to compare, the sound at a rock concert is 110 decibels. The majority of emergency calls do not require the use of sirens. However, it does seem to be that a lot of the emergency vehicles are using them. In addition, sirens can actually contribute to accidents involving EMS personnel and the public, which are often deadly. A recent study from the National Safety Council highlights the potential increase in crash risk when ambulances operate with lights and sirens on. When an ambulance responds to an emergency call without using lights and sirens, the crash rate is 4.6 per 100,000 responses. The crash rate increases to 5.5 when lights and sirens are used. The increase in risk is even greater when the ambulance is transporting a victim. The crash risk without lights and sirens is 7 per 100,000 transports and increases to 16.5 when lights and sirens are used throughout the transport. Additionally, the CDC has stated that the louder the sound, the shorter the amount of time it takes for hearing loss to occur. And the longer the exposure, the greater the risk for hearing loss. EPA has studies that have shown that there are direct links between noise and health. Problems related to noise include stress-related illnesses, high blood pressure, speech interference, hearing loss, sleep disruption, and lost productivity. Some of these can lead to heart attacks and strokes. There's a popular New York Times article that went out, I think last year or the year before, that talks about how noise can take years off your life. And those of us in the city are not doing great when it comes to that. And there are a few bills that address this. Brendan shared the one that's active with the committee. And but there are a few others that have been pending. I haven't been able to reach out to the council members to get an update on the others, but just so you have an idea of what's been introduced just the past few years. This is the one that's active, and it asks that it requires that a specific 311 category through which the public can submit service requests and requests for information regarding noise from sirens. And this is essentially a way to track how many complaints are coming in, because right now a lot of them are going to the council members, but 311 does not track noise from sirens. And the reason why all of these bills are getting introduced is because the council members are getting so many complaints to their offices. This one was proposed by Gail Brewer. And the hearing, I actually watched the hearing. I didn't see the video for it, Brendan, I don't know if you can find it, but there's definitely a recording somewhere, and there are people from my neighborhood who testified, which did not surprise me. Other ones, other proposed solutions, legislation has been proposed to require emergency vehicles use high, low, or two-tone sirens. Rumbler style sirens, these sirens are easier on the ears and can be felt as well as heard by drivers. Legislation has been proposed to limit the sound of sirens to 90 decibels. And alternative high and low frequencies. So legislation has been proposed to change the sounds of sirens to be less piercing, which is what usually gets to me when I'm home trying to work or sleep. Last but not least, a 2016 study from the University of Michigan School of Public Health concluded that a near 5 decibel reduction, which is less than the sound of leaves rustling, in overall noise would reduce the prevalence of hypertension by 1.4%, coronary heart disease by 1.8%, saving $2.4 billion annually in healthcare costs and increasing economic productivity annually by $1.5 billion.
And decrease the hearing loss,
Yes, yeah, improve everyone's health, especially here in the city.
especially conductive hearing loss.
Yeah, any thoughts? I saw Lubine had her hand raised.
Wait, who
and
did
Kevin.
first? Kevin?
This is great that we're talking about this, but what's the pushback? Is it hospitals? Because it seems like when Carlina was saying that she wished she had gotten this legislated through sooner, who's opposed to it?
I've tried to find out. I've been told some unions are against this, but other unions are for it, and I haven't gotten more information than that.
What would be the reason for against?
Oh, that they're just coming after us and preventing us from doing our job well. Brooke, do you know?
I was just gonna say that one, totally agree with you about the congestion pricing in our neighborhood, the honking just went like evaporated.
Yeah.
And it's honestly been amazing, like totally life changing. As far as the sirens, you know, I'm just trying to put myself in the position, what if I'm FDNY and what pushback what if I had like a 5-alarm fire? It's all hands on deck, you know, there's a huge building, hundreds of people trapped. Like, I'm not gonna care like what decibel it is. I'm just, you guys all need to move out of my way. I'm just trying to figure, so I'm just wondering if there could be 2 different settings on, you know, these alarms. You could have like a 5-alarm fire setting, which is extremely rarely used, and then you could have just a regular one for like, you know, 98%. It's just, you know, maybe 2 different settings for alarms is what I was thinking, and that would kind of solve any kind of pushback that could get. Just a thought.
I see Sandy.
But the opposite to that is the rest of the world survives without these loud sirens. It's really a New York and an American thing. So
More New York.
more New York
Yeah.
even than the rest of the country. So, I mean, I think it's maybe they just want to be loud.
Yeah, and,
It's a 5-alarm fire. It's, you know, it's proven that it's effective. And it's actually more effective from the data that you made.
the Rumbler one, yeah, the
Right.
Rumbler siren,
Rumblers.
which is one of the pending bills that Gail Brewer proposed, is actually more effective in getting people to move than the current
By the
like,
current.
piercing, like ear piercing one.
And it sounds like there's fewer accidents as well, right?
Yeah,
So it's a habit. I think we have to acknowledge that. There's really no reason to do it.
there's no reason, especially when there's so much research that shows that other sirens are more effective.
And one of the things, like one of the ideas was that you should have the siren be as loud inside the vehicle as it is outside. And then definitely there would be pushback.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's the same with honking. I thought if it wasn't loud inside the vehicle.
Any other question from the, I don't see.
So Mariam, I think I actually had a question, but then you kind of addressed it at the tail end of your presentation, because I had been hearing a lot of narrative in City Council that legislation had been proposed to come up with alternative sirens. And for some reason, I don't know why, I was under the impression that that had been passed. And it's just a matter of execution and implementation at this point, where the city will transition to these sirens that will be a little bit more muted and safer for hearing purposes. But it seems like it's still in, nothing has been passed yet.
Yeah, I'm glad you actually just reminded me. So the reason why I even reached out to ask about a resolution in the beginning was to kind of push the chair of the Environmental Protection Committee, and that's Councilmember Gennaro, to actually bring these bills to vote, because he has not done that, and we don't know why he hasn't done that. So part of the resolution would be saying, hey, we want you to bring these, you know, to vote, so hopefully they'll pass. Because according to him, if you watch the hearing that's linked to the bill that's on the screen right now, like he keeps saying that there's a lot of support for it. So I don't understand what the delay is. And that's from last year.
Any other question? So Mariam, so you're gonna write the Russell so we can present in March? Okay, good. So that means that in March, we're gonna have 2 Russell.
Woohoo!
That one? Okay. All right, so moving on, let's go to the next agenda, which is the discussion of the statement of district needs for healthcare and human services. And
Yeah,
Brandon has
so yes.
something to present.
Yes, let me actually gonna come to the table because it's, that way I don't have to project my voice quite as much. So. Okay. Okay, so yes, this is with regard to the statement of community district needs for healthcare and human services. So each year, CB6 submits our statement of community district needs and community board budget requests to the city. This is mandated in the city charter under section 2800 D10. For those of you watching at home, the New York City Charter is New York City's constitution. You can find this document that the city charter mandates on the CB6 website, which I am sharing right now, cbsix.org. If you go to the committees tab, click on Budget and Governmental Affairs, and click over here where it says CB6's Annual District Needs Statement. That'll lead you to the Statement of District Needs and Community Board Budget Requests. This is the size of a lengthy report. It's 47 pages. You all are familiar with the budget request portion of this document because this is what you vote on every October. Additionally, every so often, your committee discusses budget requests that are relevant to your committee. That said, you all might be a little bit less familiar with the Statement of Community District Needs portion, which I'm scrolling up to right now. This Statement of Community District Needs portion is a narrative where we go into our biggest needs in a number of different policy areas. And one of those policy areas is healthcare and human services. In recent months, the office has found that the healthcare and human services section of the Statement of Community District Needs is outdated and should be revised to reflect what's currently going on in our district in that area. A few examples showing that this section could use a little bit of an update. There are references to Mount Sinai Beth Israel, which might be, if I could type Sinai.
That's okay.
But some of those references to Mount Sinai Beth Israel might be a little bit out of date, given that the situation with MSBI now is different than what it was when we worked on this document. There are references to fiscal years 2022 and 2024. Here we're asking for certain funding being maintained in fiscal year 2024, a fiscal year that has long since ended. And there are references to COVID-19, which might not be the most relevant anymore. So these are just a few of the examples showing that this document probably hasn't been updated in a few years. So y'all may be wondering, okay, so how do we go about updating this? The place where I would start is that you need to select from this list you're looking at right now, what you all consider to be the most important issue for healthcare and human services. This is the list. The board has to select one of the items from this list here. And then once you select which of these items is the most important issue, we'll need language justifying why that particular issue is the most important issue. You can see that over here. One thing I should note is that whatever we select as the most important issue should have input from both this committee as well as housing and homelessness. The reason I say that is some of the issues that one could select as the most important issue could be more housing and homelessness related than within the purview of this committee. For example, the issue we have selected here right now, which is services to reduce or prevent homelessness. But your committee definitely should have input since it's healthcare and human services. And then once we decide on what the most important issue is, as well as how we're going to justify that most important issue, we'll need to update the rest of the healthcare and human services section of this document, according to the directions written out here. The city gives community boards very specific directions. One other piece of guidance I'll offer is to focus strictly on matters in this section that are relevant to healthcare or relevant to the Health and Environment Committee. And I say that because there are some parts of this section that are more relevant to housing and homelessness than to your committee.
Yeah,
For example, this needs for homeless New
Yeah.
Yorkers section, very important, but that's in the purview of a different committee. And the Housing and Homelessness Committee will look at this document as well. The last piece of guidance I'll offer is deadlines. So the statement of community district needs and community board budget requests is due at the end of October. So to give the Budget and Governmental Affairs Committee some time to incorporate any edits that we have to this section. The absolute latest that we should finalize this is in September, but ideally in June, just to give the Budget Committee as much time as possible. So if the committee needs to discuss this over multiple months, that is okay. And that is probably best because that'll give the committee some time to think upon and think through how it wants to craft this section. So that's pretty much it for me. Feel free to ask questions.
Are you going to talk about their response to the budget request that we just received?
You're talking about like the responses we
The
got.
responses from the city to last year's.
Yeah, so yeah, what Sandy is talking about is every January, the city sends us their preliminary responses to our budget requests. The Budget and Governmental Affairs Committee actually talked about some of those responses the other night. Like this document that we have up right now focuses more on the narrative portion of the document. So like what Sandy's talking about is more the budget request portion.
Sorry,
And-
I don't want to,
yeah.
want to derail the conversation.
No, that's-
So
Yeah,
Any comments about this portion,
Yeah.
please?
yeah, but yeah, yeah, I mean, that's definitely in reference to more the budget request portion. I mean, the budget request portion and this statement of community district needs portion should definitely be in conversation with each other. Like if we say in our budget requests that, you know, I don't know, that like needs for homeless New Yorkers is
Yes.
our top priority. And then we
So-
say in this document that, you know, like a new hospital, let's say, is what is the top priority, then like they're not in conversation with each other.
So when we update this, can we take out the ones that are not priority to our, like the need for what is that, the homelessness? That's not priority for this committee.
Yeah, so,
It's for the community, it's not for your
Yeah.
community.
so
Oh.
this is where I
Oh,
say,
so
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, this is part of why I say that it'll be important for like this committee and
And
housing and
the
homelessness.
housing.
Because the way the city splits topic areas up, there is a healthcare and human services section, so it doesn't perfectly split by
Okay.
how we split our committees on CB6. So, like if we decide to do that, I would definitely recommend talking with housing and homelessness before doing that. They may also have an opinion.
I see. So this is for the entire
It's for our community.
community?
Yes,
Okay, all right.
yes,
And I must say, some of the other committees actually try and take this as a way to shape the discussion for the year. If you decide that mental health is
Right.
contributing to homelessness, then that's something that the committee over the year tries to focus on and come to some, some way that we can deal with it.
Yes. Because I think that would be a more priority now, the mental health issue that give rise to those homelessness.
I think it's usually the other way. Homelessness increases mental health issues. I like,
No.
I don't know that it's one or the other, but
I think
homelessness.
it's different for
definitely-
everything, right?
Huh?
I
Maybe?
said, no, I was just saying it should be case by case, right? I don't know if we can blanketly.
Yeah, just generally speaking, it definitely
Well, definitely,
has a
it,
negative effect on mental health. Though. Just experiencing homelessness is very traumatic.
yeah. So, if, homelessness and mental health are two issues that, I mean,
They are
homelessness is,
related.
like, in that case, in this narrative portion, we should seek to like really speak to both. Obviously, the homelessness portion is more housing and homelessness, but like there's still a tie-in between homelessness and mental health, as multiple committee members have talked about. So it's not like we need to completely ignore that issue.
And
Yeah.
regardless of what causes the mental health issue, we need to have a way to deal with it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But like all of these thoughts are thoughts that are worth like considering how to include in this statement of community district needs portion.
So whatever we decided kind of still has to kind of work with the Housing and Homelessness Committee, because it all kind of has to fit together like a puzzle.
Mhm,
Like it
mhm.
has to go hand
Because
in hand, right?
Yeah.
So regardless of what we pick, we still have to like connect it with.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. And housing and homelessness will take a look at this as well. Like this is relevant to both committees. But I would say.
Yeah, it needs to be updated because the COVID is, it's not anymore relevant.
Yeah. Yeah, the COVID references, definitely the references to fiscal years long since passed, like fiscal year
Yeah.
2024 ended, I think, middle of 2024. Like this is getting a bit into the weeds here, but the city has like a July 1st to June 30th fiscal year. So like fiscal year 2025 started July 1st, 2024. So yeah, fiscal year 2024 is months and months and months in the past. And fiscal year 2022 is multiple years in the past.
So how do you want us to contribute in updating this?
Yes, so I would say the first thing is, I don't know, like if you all have read this document, but if not, definitely give it a read. And if and, whenever you do so, or if you've done so already, start to think about like how you would want to, well, first of all, think about whether the issues we talk about here still exist in the way we talk about them. If so, we'll still need to edit some of the references because like fiscal year 2024 is literally so last year. But if you read this and you find, oh, like some of these things that we write about here are not so relevant anymore, then we'll need to rewrite to more closely fit what we think our district's needs are in this area. I don't know if that answers your question. It's all about having a narrative that fits what our needs are. I see Marty has his hand raised.
Marty?
Yeah, while the housing and homeless or unhoused committee has their priorities, that isn't necessarily what this committee needs to focus on. It's like for instance, for a couple of years, we wanted to educate the community and have a health fair. We were unable to do that because we couldn't find space for the 30 to 40 vendors that we were going to have. That doesn't have anything to do with the Housing and Homeless Committee, but it definitely had something to do with our being effective in educating the community in regards to the health and welfare of the community. So we have to think a little bit broader than just determining what another committee wants to put in there. And, it doesn't necessarily have to meld together. It's all part of our community's needs.
Yeah, I totally
And so
agree.
it's broader than just how we fit into what their needs are.
Yes.
But Marty, are you saying that our community needs more health education? Is that basically what you're stating?
For a couple of years, 4 years ago, we had a wonderful health fair. There was a great space, I forgot, I guess it was by
At Baruch.
NYU. And we had 40 vendors, and there was all sorts of wonderful things that were presented. And after that, NYU was having their construction or this or that, and they said no more, they can't have that, or was COVID possibly. And we then tried to find different spaces to have our health fair, and we could not.
Yeah, and we
And-
had one that was almost, everything was prepared already, and last minute, NYU canceled that.
Yeah, because they didn't want the third-party vendors, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
But
But
And the health-
I agree. We need education. Education is the baseline, the bottom line. We need to educate the community on everything.
But
Yeah,
is that one of
but-
the items in the?
But yeah, but for the purposes of this document, like the important thing is figuring out what we think our needs are in healthcare and human services. So just to circle back to this document, so.
Brendan, can we see the list again?
Yes. So this list for the record is the list of items we could choose as what we consider to be our most important issue in healthcare and human services. There is an other option if you don't think any of these items are the most important issue in that realm. But one of these from the list has to be selected. I see. Okay, Brock, you had a question?
I was just gonna say that, I think, over the last few weeks, the health needs have changed dramatically, and these are a little bit outdated. And just to give you an example of kind of what's on my mind is that, RFK Jr. is sworn in as the US Health and Human Services Chief, today, who's an anti-vaxxer,
Yeah.
while, there's a measles outbreak
Yeah.
in Texas, and the anti-vax
TB outbreak also.
so I think vaccinations is going to be a massive issue in this community.
Yeah.
There's also an attempt to cut NIH funding, and conflict interest for me because I work for Mount Sinai, but Mount Sinai, NYU, Cornell, these are massive research institutions. And the research mission will collapse with cancer research, infectious disease research. NYU stopped treating transgender youth.
Okay.
And there was a rally of thousands of people, and Letitia James got involved and said that's unconstitutional. So these are like massive issues happening all around us. There's undocumented immigrants who I'm hearing reports are afraid to go to the hospitals and do not feel safe. There is federal funding for, Bellevue and New York City Health Hospitals, billions of dollars in federal funding. I mean, I feel like this is all outdated. Like we're facing massive health issues now. Anyway, I'll stop talking, but that's kind of what's on my mind.
Yeah, and part of why we're starting the discussion now is so that if need be, the committee can spend several months updating this, because I agree, this is outdated.
Naveen had her hand raised.
Yeah, Naveen? Naveen, did you have your hand raised?
I'm sorry, I was muted. I didn't realize I started talking without. No, I said I just wanted to echo what Barak was saying. I'm not a physician. There's much more competent people on the committee to talk about health priorities, but just, having been part of this committee for the last many months and having heard all that NYU presenters have been coming and sharing with us, clearly, I think that entire list, as Barak is saying, probably needs to be reevaluated to see if each category needs to be upgraded. But one of the things they did mention was that in our district, heart disease is one of the largest, it is the leading cause of, illness and death in the district. And so talking about what you said, LV, we've been talking about, we need to educate. We feel like we're a community board. We need to go out there, find some kind of a forum to convey all that we're hearing, this incredible committee needs to be shared out there. We can't rely on them to read our newsletter or see our website. So I do love the idea of having a health fair. And also maybe it can be done in concert with revitalizing this list and seeing what is more fresh and topical right now. And I'm
Yeah.
happy to look into helping find a space for the health fair.
Yeah.
I'm happy to help if I can.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so we'll probably put this again in our agenda
Yeah.
next month.
Yeah, this can be on the agenda next month. The committee can think about, like, what are some of the things, I see Kevin has his hand raised.
Yeah, this is brief. As the designate for the Bellevue Advisory Committee, we have talked about there being space at Bellevue to do so, like the Rose Room, the old library, they do have space. I realize that it's not perfect, that you have to go through some level of security to get in there for the public, but Bellevue is welcoming, using space for things like that. It does anyway for its lobby. So please keep Bellevue in mind, and I'd be happy to go back to our next meeting and see if we can find some space that makes sense, if we want to go forward with the health fair.
Good. Thank you. Any
You're
other
welcome.
question? Any new or old business from any member? No? I do not have any reports, so if there are no.
Oh, this is about the decibel, the decibel levels.
The decibel level.
Yes.
And I guess also under old business, just the response to the budget request. I think we have to submit our response back to them by next Tuesday.
Yeah, the budget request portion of the budget request and statement of community district needs.
Right. And there was also, they need some clarification on that request, so that's maybe something you could add to a future agenda as well. What exactly, the response came from the Parks Department for our community center. So
the
I'm not sure
community
we have the
center,
same
yeah.
image of what a community center is. So, yeah, some clarification. Marty has his hand up.
Marty?
Yeah, I didn't want to bring it up, but the reason that AEDs are in New York or came to New York was from CB6. The Public Safety Committee in '93. Actually, I had seen an article that in Portland, they were putting AEDs on emergency vehicles, where in New York, if you had a heart attack on the street, you had a 4% chance of living. And in Portland, it was a 60% chance because of the AEDs. We wrote a resolution, passed the board, went to the city council, also went to the state, and the New York State senator put $10 million to have the AEDs put on the emergency vehicles. It went onto the fire department, and EMS took it up right away. The police department took a few years longer because they didn't want the expense of training, but nonetheless, it's because of CB6 that it came as early as it did.
Yeah.
Marty, why
Thank
wouldn't
you.
you want to bring that up?
I have norovirus, and I really, I'm so weak, and I can hardly talk. That I'm able to just
But-
hang out. I'm happy.
But the vessel was coming from us. It was
Yeah.
us that
Go
did the
CB6.
vessel. No, the Health and Human Services.
Nice.
Okay, so no objections for anything?
It sounds like we have some homework. Maybe each
Yes.
community member has to think about priorities.
Yes. Yes.
and come up with, I don't know, 2 or 3 for the
Mhm.
next meeting.
Yeah,
That would be good.
yeah, that sounds like good homework, you
Yeah.
know, to look again at the document, you know, think about, like, if you think what we talk about in the document's outdated, then think about, like, what priorities should be discussed. That sounds like a good launching point.
Awesome.
Okay, so thank you everyone for coming, and the meeting is adjourned at 8:01.
Have a good
Bye.
evening.
Good evening, everyone.